Hello and greetings. Let's see here. Alright, I just wanted to put some thoughts out there regarding just a lot of different things that I've experienced in my life and how that whole journey has unfolded, especially over the last several years, and just kind of put out my observations and experiences and things like that, and why I have the outlook on certain things that I do, and how how my opinions and all of those things have changed over time. Because I feel like I've definitely had a lot of like change, a lot of reconfiguration of my worldview, or not even just worldview, but just like, I don't know, my just different aspects of my personality or character or what have you. And my thoughts are usually not very organized. I don't really know how to organize them, so I don't know how this will end up, but we will see. And I'll just put stuff out there, and folks can do with it what they may, take it how they may. Um, So yeah, I mean, as far as the title goes, an empath's dilemma. The reason I chose that for the title is, um, is mainly in reference to feeling that I have empathic um, characteristics or qualities or whatever. Um, having felt that for a while, empath, I guess, like as far as I know, or what it means to me, mainly just being someone who can sense other people's feelings, or sense, just kind of really understand people in a in a way that's not really explainable, by any conventional definition. It's not just certainly not some kind of like scientific thing. It's not really material. It's just kind of like a sense that's kind of you know non non physical or non empirical, and non um I don't know. I'm not sure how else to explain it, but just kind of like a just a sense that people can have, where they sometimes feel other people's emotions. It's kind of characterized that way sometimes. um, Either feeling them, or being really attuned to them, or being able to read people in certain ways, or what have you. I've kind of always felt that way. And just to mention, the self-actualization part is just gonna be like kind of where I've gone with all these observations and things, changes, like I referenced, where that those things have kind of led me to that kind of path of self-actualization. And I guess that will tie in after I talk more about the whole empath aspect. um, and I will hopefully make them like seem cohesive in some way. But self-actualization is kind of like where I've gone, the direction I've gone in more recent years, or whatever. Something that I found myself like doing, like not even on purpose, kind of doing a lot of just like introspection and all that good stuff. And I've experienced a lot of like change within my worldview and things like that. So back to the whole empath aspect. So yeah, I mean, I would say like from at least like late teens or something, like my late teens or early 20s or something like that, I've definitely like felt this ability to like to sense people's emotions, and even deeper than that, like just be able to have a really good sense of people. And, over time that's really developed into like a really, something that, I use a lot. Like it's an important like aspect of my life. I feel like I've really honed it in some way. Um, like I started out just having like the inclination or a suspicion or whatever, just like an inchoate feeling of being able to like really connect, with people in a way that's hard to explain. And over time, it's like as I've become more and more comfortable with it, and like really also accepting, that that's something that's real. Like I'm not just imagining it, or that I'm just whatever crazy or what have you. Um, it's become just more pronounced and easier to rely on, easier to just yeah, I mean to be able to use. And I would say I've used that a lot. I mean in things that I've been through, um, being able to like have a good sense of people has helped a lot. Um, I have this I have a sense that I'm able to really distinguish people, distinguish um, whether a person is like a threat to me, or just like whether someone's just a putting on a front, right? Putting on some kind of facade, right? The falseness of a lot of people, I think. Um, or whether someone's being genuine, someone's being, all of those things. And I would say over time, it's kind of like, it's kind of made me feel that I had to control it in some way, because I was kind of like over involved with, other people, with really like feeling, uh, their emotions and like wanting to help them all the time. I guess that's where I'm getting at. Like I kind of started out as like a very idealistic person, I guess. Um, I don't know if it's partially due to like my background or my upbringing, but I guess I came from like people who were also fairly idealistic and like believed in um, strong values and things like that, and really, I guess I got the idea that people were mostly good, and or just it's hard to explain. Just like really expecting a lot from people in a sense, like really not expecting manipulation, or other things that would be characterized as bad characteristics to have. But over time, I feel like just like having life experience, and like having dealt with people, like I feel like that eroded over time, like as far as the high expectation, the idealism. And over time I've like that's I've kind of had to let go of that, and really recognize that it's a lot more complicated than that. It's not that I don't it's not that I don't think most people are quote unquote good, but it's just not it's not a black and white thing. It's not simple. It's not as simple as just saying like, is a person good or bad. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So and I came to that realization from like, yeah, from actually talking with people and all of that. And the reason I say it's an empath's dilemma is because I've gotten to the point where I've learned like so much about people that it's actually kind of disturbing. I mean, like I said, I it eroded my idealism, and eroded like the childlike belief that like, oh, people are just good. Life is like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or some shit. Life is um, if you're just a good person, a good, nice person. I was like really big on like niceness, as a child and all that. And I thought like if I was just a nice person, that people would be nice to me in turn, right? Like the golden rule or whatever. And over time, like I realized that that outlook is really not practical in a lot of cases, in a lot of situations in life, and that kind of led to me becoming, somewhat disillusioned and somewhat um, cynical and somewhat misanthropic, even. Um, and I would also say there's kind of like different parts of me, that there's still a part that is very idealistic and like wants to see the best in everyone and all of that. Um, I definitely still have that within me, but there's also like the part that's um, that's very. I mean, I don't know if it's completely cynical, but it's just just not uh, doesn't see things that way. Is more just on guard, I guess you could say, just like ready to like fight, basically, like ready to throw down if a person is you know gonna not be a nice, good, decent person or what have you. There's a part of me that's on guard for that also, and apart from being on guard, um, over time, is like I've learned more about people. I've also kind of like, the reason it disturbs me is because I realize like um, quite the opposite from like that people are not good. The issue is that I think, yeah, I think most people are, quote unquote good. I mean, again, it's complicated, but just for simplicity's sake, I'll just, use good and bad, just for the sake of keeping it simple for now. But yeah, most people are good. Like when I say that, I guess I just mean, like, to me, that just means, they're not actively going out trying to harm people or trying to um, be manipulative or what have you. Um, like the values I was mentioning earlier, like I think a lot of people are like that. They really, believe in being nice or being helpful, being kind, being whatever. They're not looking for, um, looking to hurt anyone. But there are some people who, who are very manipulative and really don't care and have, really kind of don't have that instinct within them to like want to be nice or kind to anyone. And I guess that's what's called antisocial sometimes, in the psychological lingo. I mean, there's a lot of terms out there, and I'm not huge into like psychology, psychiatry, but just for the sake of like familiarity, there are people who are called, sociopath or psychopath or narcissist. So there are people like that. There are people who truly don't have a I guess what some people would call like a moral compass or what have you, or just empathy, right? Don't have empathy for anyone, don't care what anything that they don't care about how anything they do affects anyone else, right? And so, I mean, the disturbing aspect is that it's not just that, right? But it's that just learning how the majority of people, like I said, who are, quote unquote good, really don't understand that. Like, even though, it's all out there, like I said, the narcissist, the psychopath, sociopath, like people, like the average person who like I believe is, more on the good side, who isn't looking to harm people, they don't seem to fully understand and fully grasp, like, the different ways that the type of person who is, if you want to say antisocial or whatever, all the different ways that manifests. I think it manifests in a lot of different ways, and people just can't see that. And frankly, people who have those antisocial characteristics are the ones who dominate society. I mean, that's kind of the way I see it. They're the people in all the positions of power, whether it's government or private business, all of that, authority figures in whatever institution you can think of. It's typically, I would say almost all the time, it's going to be people who have, low empathy and things like that, who rise to the top in those positions. And it seems like despite there being a lot of talk about, you know those personality types or characteristics, people just still don't fully grasp that. And that's why we see these cycles of things that keep happening. And I guess this is a good time to bring up this topic. It's almost election day in the U.S. once again, and things like that, where people, the average person who, like I said, sees himself as a good person or whatever, they just keep being sucked into these things over and over and over again. And even though there are, obviously lots of people out there who say, yeah, like politicians are corrupt or untrustworthy and this and that, people still, like a lot of people, I mean, not everyone apparently, I guess that's some good news. Apparently a lot of people don't vote anymore, or gave up on that, because they do seem to recognize that to some degree. But a lot of people still don't, and I think that is a very big impediment, for people who care about, you know, just conditions in the world. Or let's just use like the U.S. for example. Like they want to improve things. They, all of those things. I mean, it's still a hard barrier to overcome. Just the fact that people have a desire to believe, believe in these different politicians, believe in different movements, even just you know, and kind of repeat these cycles over and over. And that's what's made me get to a point of like having to let go of like the idea of, you know uh, saving humanity, or whatever it is, or making even just like making, social change on a large scale, or what all of those things, because it is difficult. I mean, it's difficult to combat the fact that there is so much manipulation put out there by those aforementioned people who do control, the mass media and all of those things. And most people don't really go beyond, the typical things that are spoon fed to them or put in front of them. And so that's what you end up with, is this never ending cycle of people, you know, just being manipulated and tricked into things, supporting things that just never get anywhere, and being resistant to things that maybe could be helpful, but they resist them because a lot of average people will see them as like too radical, because that's what they've been told, by the same manipulative people who hold all the positions of power and influence, in a given society. So, I spent, several years doing political activism and things like that. And really, again, like, being idealistic and really wanting to believe that if I just went out and like tried to inform people and tried to, talk to people, engage people, and educate people and all of that, that they could see through things or understand things, or be persuaded to take action on things. And as time went on, I really realized how futile it was, and how, again, most people just keep falling into the same pattern. I've, before this whole age of like not going out or whatever prior to 2020, I was doing the old school, activism stuff, like being out there on the street trying to talk to random people, you know, giving out flyers, trying to, engage people in conversation, all of that stuff. And realistically, even after several hours, like, you can be out there for 5 hours and you're lucky if you get like one or two people who are interested in hearing what you have to say. Obviously most people will like not even acknowledge you and not even look at you. And some people will disagree with what you're saying, depending on the topic. But yeah, overall, it's just a very difficult thing. And I think, over time I learned that, yeah, most people are really kind of in their own bubble, they're in their own world. The only things they engage with are these incredibly simplified things that are put in front of them by the mainstream media, or by whatever other approved sources, the government or academia, or all of those things. And they're really not, they don't really have the like intellectual curiosity to really get outside that. So if it's, if you're trying to tell them something they've never heard, you don't get much of response to that, because most people don't want to get into that, like, for various reasons, whether it's because they find it disturbing, or they find it unbelievable, or all of those things. They don't want to believe it, and a lot of people will think that if a certain thing you're telling them was true, that they would have heard it from mainstream sources and all of that shit. And yeah, it's really uh, impenetrable situation, I found. And I guess going beyond that, like, um, recognizing that most people are kind of like that, and what do I do with that, right? Because it was depressing. Like I said, I was really idealistic, and I really thought I could make change happen in that way in other people, and I kind of had to accept that I don't think I really can. I think it has to come from within, and that's the thing too, right? So how does a person come to those, how do they get to a place where they are willing to accept like different opinions, things that contradict what they've believed? I guess that's really the most difficult obstacle, is like, if information conflicts with what they already have accepted for a long time, like, that's really difficult. And I don't think most people, are really truly willing or able to do that. I haven't seen it happen very often. And if it happens, sometimes it happens to just a small degree, or happens, maybe it can happen very gradually, or yeah, sometimes people will learn something, but then go in a different direction, like go back into another trap, I would say. That's something I've seen over the last 2 years, where there were a lot of people who supposedly, what some people say, woke up to certain things. The concepts of, like, yeah, the things you're told by certain, so-called authorities and institutions is not necessarily true or accurate. And so, over the last 2 years, I've seen like a lot of people try to grapple with that. And even though they had started questioning certain things, they then, a lot of people then, a lot of those people, excuse me, a lot of those people then had a tendency to then fall into traps, fall into other things that are bullshit. Especially like, there's a lot of talk about like censorship and media and all of that stuff. There is a lot of, there's, probably more people than, in a long time or ever questioning like mainstream media, but then they turn to like alternative media that is also bullshit. That's a really big problem. I know a lot of people have been talking about that. And to me, that comes back to again this like this nature within a lot of people that they want to believe in something, right? Like it really comes back to that. They want to believe in something. They want something to grab onto. They want certainty, right? I think that's like one of the biggest issues. I mean, people can't deal with the feeling of like not being certain or not knowing something for sure, and that's why people don't engage with nuance, and they'd rather have a black and white view of things. And I just see it as like um such just an intransigent thing. It's like, what can you do, right? I mean, if like I said, I can't change that external, like I can't change that from outside of a person. Like, it has to come from within. And so, especially with being an empath, and like I said, I was like kind of a bleeding heart, or whatever people want to say. Like, I cared about people. I could feel their suffering. I wanted to believe in like all these significant social change and all those things could be made. Um, but at the same time, the limitations of people, do get in the way. I mean, because again, if it has to come from within people, no one can make them understand certain things. No one can make them accept certain things or unlearn things that are, working against them. The amount of like, the amount of internalized bullshit people carry around is like extreme. People carry around all kinds of beliefs that have been inculcated into them by people who hate them, people who want to keep them controlled and ignorant, forever. And unfortunately, again, it's hard to get people to step outside that and to see things, for what they are, that they are just these control tactics and manipulations that go against their interests, as a person and all of that. Um, so yeah, I mean, you know, it's been like it was a difficult thing to like have to let go of, like, that desire to like, some political bents will say like liberating people. I don't really believe that's a thing. I don't think, you know like any one group can liberate other people if they aren't on that page, because that's kind of the problem. Like, if they don't want it for themselves, like, how good would that be? Like, how would that end up, really? And I don't think that would work out really well, honestly. And if they haven't, like, gotten to a place where, where they want those things, right? You can't impose those things, even if, I think it would benefit them or whatever. You can't impose that on them. So, yeah, the dilemma is just, you know, going from like a place of feeling, so deeply like the suffering of people and all of that, and then having to recognize that people themselves are, essentially in their own way. I mean, in the way of like this progress or change, like they're part, of the problems that persist. They participate in those same functions of society or institutions or all of those things, that also work against their interests, right? So, just realizing that there are people who are, what I would think are good and all of that, but, just being good isn't enough, right? I mean, the issue, like I said, that people are so easily manipulated in most cases and end up, perpetuating the same things on uh, other people and even on themselves or what have you. It's, it really had to, it really, culminated in me having to like let go of all of that, let go of, even just the concept of like, um, yeah, I mean, change on like a large scale. I mean, you know, on a small scale, like of course there's things that can be done, but as far as like the grand ideas of revolution or whatever you want to call it, all of that stuff, like I've kind of gotten to a place where I don't really think that's doable. Not with the mentality that people have, and I mean, and so this brings up like the concept of human nature. I would I personally don't, I don't make, assumptions or uh, statements, like definite statements about human nature. I think, I don't think, people, I don't think anyone like today can say for sure what that is. Like, because who knows, like, it might have changed over different periods of time, different eras. I mean, who knows? Like, what, the true, whatever the true human nature is, like, I don't know that anyone can really speak to that. But, you can draw conclusions based on, like, the way people act now, whether, again, I don't think that means it's, like, human nature as such, but it is a certain pattern of behavior, right? And like I said, I think most people don't have much choice in that. It's a product of socialization, and that's gonna. I'm gonna show a part of a video that talks about that a little bit, where I think that society is, the way people are socialized, and all the things people learn, like I said, are, you know, actually pretty harmful. Um, and that's where, you know, you're kind of stuck because it's like you can't, like I said, I feel like it's so hard to undo that, once it's done. And, but the problem obviously being that if society and all of those like imprinted values and all of these other things that people have, you know, if they're there already, that's kind of what you're stuck with. And also, it does serve, a purpose, right? Like traditions or, shared values or group think, they those things have like a purpose. And what you know, my thing is that I think, I mean, they have good and bad sides, right? That's the thing. It's like, yeah, there's a function to like group identity or tradition or whatever, but there's always, a negative side. And um, so yeah, I think there's a lot of things that act negatively, upon people, even though people cling to them so tightly, and they kind of do make up like a large part of the human experience, if you want to say that. Like beliefs and values and all of these things that I get really tired of hearing, because they do seem to be at the root of a lot of problems. And like I said, it doesn't have to be all bad or all good, but they obviously end up causing a lot of issues, right? Like whether it's religion or any identity, group identity, nationalism, all those things. Like, you can, there, I would think there's a way to have balance. Like, I don't think everyone has to be the same and not have, like, any sense of identity or group identification, but at the same time, it doesn't have to become antagonistic. And that's, what I think we see in the world so much is like, it's not enough to just say, like, I'm from this country. It ends up having to be, well, my country is the best country there ever was. And, that's just how it starts, or, my religion is the only true and correct religion, and everything else is evil and whatever. If you don't, convert to my religion, you deserve to suffer for eternity, or what have you. It's like, it's not enough to just be like, you know, I have this set of beliefs and it works for me, and that's it. And you can have your set of beliefs, and it works for you, and then I can accept that. I can accept the difference without making it antagonistic. And that's one of those things that really irritates me, because it really feels like that's why we can't have nice things. I mean, obviously there's been plenty of talk about how divided, U.S. society is, and, at least just speaking, I can only speak to the U.S. personally, but yeah, it seems like division has just become so deep in, just been increasing over the last several years or whatever. And yeah, it's like painful to watch. I mean, like I said, as someone who's like, I can empathize with pretty much anyone, even people who I have like strong disagreements with, like just a disagreement of opinion on a certain thing. Like, I can understand where people come from, right? And but what I see is like that, like, even having that basic like understanding is gone, and people just take the uh such you know strict positions that, like, my opinion's right. Anyone who disagrees with my opinion is like the devil, like literally Satan, literally Hitler. Like, why does it have to be like that? I really don't know. And that's what's so difficult to have to see, that in a lot of ways things, are moving in the wrong direction, um, over things that I don't think have to be antagonistic, like, you know, that the concept of coexistence, I think could happen, but at the same time, the way people, act, I don't know that it can, unless people have, like, again, this like inner change, and some kind of evolution where they stop falling for these tactics, uh, that just um, are meant to, yeah, divide people and just rile up these like base instincts, these like base tribal instincts of us versus them all the time over every issue. And that there's, no nuance, there's no in between, there's nothing outside of those things. It's always like one or the other, and are, the people who disagree with me are the enemy, and they're gonna destroy society. And so, yeah, I think the society concept is just difficult, because if that's the way it's always gonna be, is just people, these sides fighting for control, right? Fighting to be, enshrined in law, or in just accepted, the accepted opinion in a society. It's like, God, I'm like better off like not being in a society then, because if that's, it's gonna be this level of antagonism all the time. It's just too much to take, really. And um and that's where it's been a dilemma for me, is like wanting to, again, like, part of me wanting to see the best in people, but then, after years of like observation and experience with people, seeing that how easy it is for people to just fall into these things all the time, over and over again. Seems like the same narratives all the time. And, also the frustration that certain topics, topics that some might call, the culture war topics, like those things just get so much more, those things just generate so much more energy and attention, right, than anything else, right? Than any topic like economics or what have you. Like those, in comparison, like those things are just like not attractive to people, but people, so many people are just so attracted to the culture war topic. It's like the whole um, like yeah, I don't know. It's like like moths to a flame. Like a lot of those topics. It's like if people put the amount of energy and time they put into like going to battle over these culture war topics, like if they put all that energy into like helping, God forbid, helping people, helping their neighbors and their community, it would be such a different society, right? It would be such a different world, and yet that's what people, decide to put their energy into, and that's what is tough, really tough for me to witness all the time, and yeah, I don't know. I guess that's why I felt like I had to let go, let go of like that attachment, or just feeling other people's emotions and suffering, because it's like it is overwhelming from that perspective for me, uh, to sense that all the time, and sense how so much of it is utterly useless, honestly, and just like self-imposed, right? I mean, and as far as the concept of like free will, because there's always a lot of always like discussions and debates over like the concept of free will, right? So like, do people choose to be, the way they are? Do they choose to be, you know, obsessed with the culture war issues? Do they choose to be easily manipulated? And, I think, they don't. I think free will is, again, a, complicated concept. Like, I don't know that it's all one or the other, that either people have, like, complete free will, or that they have absolutely no free will. I mean, I feel like it's probably somewhere in between that, but just observing people, I feel like most people, um, you know, kind of don't, and again, is that human nature, or is that an absolute truth, or is it caused by just the factors that are present in society, like at this point in time? I don't know, but it's a difficult thing, because like I can't just sit here and be like, oh, people just choose to be stupid, they choose to be distracted, they choose to be this, because I don't know that I chose to be the way that I am. I don't feel like I chose to see things the way I see them, right? I didn't just get up one day and like choose to not fall into these ideological traps or emotional traps, or whatever you want to call them, just all these manipulations, whether it's like just the simple like TV advertisement. No, I don't fucking watch TV anymore, but you know what I mean, just like commercials, advertisements, and that's something that's also talked about, but most people still fall into them just without recognizing it. All just everything that people take for granted, that they internalize, right, about reality, comes from all of these sources, which, like I said earlier, are really not interested in their well-being, and that's really the problem. So again, like, if people truly had like a complete free will choice, like, yeah, why would they choose to keep falling into these traps? That's, so I don't think that's how it works, and that's kind of the problem. So it's like I can't even be, you know, angry or whatever at people, because it's like they didn't choose it, you know. But at the same time, I also like accept my irritation with people, or sometimes even misanthropy, because even if people don't choose, they're not actively choosing to be the way they are. It's like I'm also not gonna beat myself up for feeling the way I feel either, right? If I'm disappointed or I'm depressed and all those things, having come from such an idealistic past, and then becoming pretty disillusioned with humanity, or whatever you might say. um, you know, I just like kind of accept, like, if that's how I feel about it, I'm gonna accept it. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say to myself like, oh, I should just be nice all the time, or whatever, or not feel irritated, not feel, not call people, stupid assholes or ignorant. If that's how how I feel, and if that's how I react to something, that's how I react. Even though, like I said, ultimately, no, I don't think people just are choosing those things. But it is what it is. It's present, and unfortunately, insofar as the majority of a population are a certain way, like, it does affect me, insofar as I'm stuck within a certain society. I mean, what alternatives are there? I mean, well, frankly, I'm kind of looking into them, but they're certainly not easy, trying to escape from a society or whatever. So, yeah, that was more talking than I thought I was going to do on the topic, but yeah, it's really hard to explain. There's just a lot there to unpack. But with that, I'll play this first clip, and I have the links to these videos that I'm going to show in the description box. And so this first clip is just talking about this. I get this figure from like ancient Rome, I think. Geez, I didn't even pay enough attention to know like if he's from Rome or Greece or whatever. Whatever. To me, it's all the same. But so he's like this philosopher in a way, but also not like a formal philosopher, and just kind of talking about his view. And I only learned about this figure, this person, recently, and I realized how well it does describe how I feel about a lot of things. It touches on like the human nature concept, and I realized how close it is to how I feel, even though I've developed these my views and come to these views over time, and like just recently saw this, and I was like kind of surprised at how well it dovetails with what I think. So I'll go ahead and show that.
Diogenes thought that when one turned their attention away from abstract speculation to the concrete here and now, they would soon observe that most human beings are, to put it in the nicest way possible, quite pitiful creatures. In one of the more famous anecdotes about Diogenes, it is said that one day he went into the marketplace in broad daylight with a lantern, saying, "I am looking for a man." He never found what he was looking for, that is, self-sufficient, free, and happy individuals, but instead found only ignorant, obedient, and worthless creatures. Diogenes treated others with the disrespect he thought they deserved. One day, when a few people were throwing bones at Diogenes as they would to a dog, he got up and urinated on them. He thought that if the human species should go extinct, there should be as much cause for regret as there should be if flies and wasps should pass away. He even went so far as to try to quicken the rate of the extinction of mankind. When Diogenes was begging on the street, a man started to mock him and said, "I will give you, but only if you can persuade me," to which Diogenes responded, "If I could have persuaded you of anything, I would have persuaded you to hang yourself." While Diogenes was certainly a misanthrope who ridiculed and condemned human beings, He did not think human nature was corrupt and to blame for the depravity which permeates mankind. Instead, he believed that human beings are by nature good and virtuous, but that they have been corrupted by the artificial social norms, customs, practices, and values which are inculcated into them via the process of socialization. These artificial social constraints are conforming forces, which turn potentially strong and independent individuals into obedient sheep. In fact, Diogenes made it his life's mission to debase or destroy these social norms, practices, and values which he believed weakened individuals. To do this, he attempted to display through his actions how ridiculous and arbitrary many of them are. Once, when the city of Corinth heard news that they were soon to be under attack, the citizens went into a panic and began preparing for the coming battle. Diogenes, oblivious as to what all the fuss was about, began rolling his pithos, or tub in which he lived, up and down a hill. Someone asked why he was performing such a pointless task, to which he replied, "Just to make myself look as busy as the rest of you." According to Diogenes, the goals and ends which people devote their lives to, and the flurry of pointless activity they engage in to achieve these goals, are Sisyphean tasks that are about as meaningful as rolling a tub up and down a hill over and over, or in the case of Sisyphus, carrying a boulder up a hill every day, only to have it roll back down at the end of each day. So convinced.
Alright, so that was the first clip, and I mean, as you saw there, I mean, it mentions how that person, Diogenes, doesn't, think humans are inherently corrupt, but he thinks they have been corrupted by society, and I that's kind of how I feel, honestly. I think, you know, I think the state people are in now is just really, really not good, really not fun to watch. As I was just talking about, I feel like anything I try to do is really, just not gonna go anywhere. It has to come from within other, within people themselves, and I had to kind of accept that, and if that makes me, if I end up feeling like somewhat, misanthropic because of that, and that's what it is, even though at the same time, like I said, part of me still wants to have that empathy and all of that for people. And, yeah, I recommend watching that whole video. That was a really short clip, but it's pretty interesting. So that link's in the description. And, yeah, I mean, like I said, people, Buddhism, I've been looking into Buddhism more lately, after obviously only knowing very superficial things about it. But that's another thing that, like, I've been surprised at how much it resonates with me after, like, different, coming to all these different, like, outlooks, or, how my worldview's kind of changed over time, and Buddhism does have an aspect, not for like everyone. I mean, there's different like levels. There's people who just meditate and still live in like a pretty normal, quote unquote normal life within society and all of that. But there's also an aspect of, especially like a monk or monastic person who does detach from society, and that's talked about in Taoism also. Detaching from society, because society does have a, corrupting influence on people. I mean, I guess even, so that, I mean, those things, those philosophies or religion that have been around for like hundreds, if not thousands of years, so I guess it's not just a modern thing, and so is the Diogenes person was also from like however many thousands of years ago. So, yeah, I mean, I guess there's always certain things. It's not just, the way society is now is just like the latest manifestation, but I guess there are always those aspects. Maybe, like I said, I don't want to take, like, I don't want to make any like solid declaration about human nature, but yeah, I mean, I guess there are always things, and that's why I'm like, you know, I'm kind of like trying to escape this concept of society because like I don't like the way it seems to affect people. I mean, all the different whatever different aspects of a society that make up a society. It's like, I feel like again, like I feel like most people are, want to be good and want to do this and that, do right by others, but you bring in all these other influences and like pursuit of things that are kind of manufactured. Whether it's like the new car and the the white picket fence and just whatever it is. People once people have it in their minds they need those things, it's like, then it's like, what are they willing to do to get those things? And that's where we end up. People participate in things that are not, really in harmony with other people, with nature and everything else. Just kind of spiritually bankrupt, in the pursuit of like things that are material, that are, you know, fleeting and I don't know. It's tough to watch, but over time, like the more I've kind of just accepted like the way I feel about society, it's been comforting actually. And like I said, even just finding like Buddhism and Taoism, like studying that more in depth, and just realizing that I'm not like the only one who's thought those things. That I'd kind of rather be outside society and stuff like that. So getting to the second part, the self-actualization, this kind of plays off of the topic I was just talking about, where I feel that people are just trapped in these mindsets, in these cycles, and manipulated, and just all of these other things. Part of that manipulation, like I would say, is social norms. I mean, that was mentioned in the clip as well. Social norms and values, morality and law, which is codified morality in any given society, and just all of those things together, as is mentioned in the clip I'm going to play. Like, are those things truly good? Right, like we're raised to think certain things are just good, certain values and morals are good, but are they really good, or are they just meant to keep people, in bondage, in a kind of slavery, again, serving certain people, certain institutions, whoever decides what, this quote unquote society is supposed to be, and like who that serves ultimately, who decides that a society should be a certain way, or that people should behave a certain way. I mean, all of those questions. Um, and I mentioned earlier that, I grew up like really idealistic and like kind of having that sense of like, adhering to that moral code, and like, being that ideal all the time. And over time, I've kind of let go of that also, and just like been willing to question all of that, question who that serves, right? So as far as like being nice, for example, um, being agreeable, or being, having a certain decorum, right? And like a certain way you're supposed to behave that's socially acceptable in whatever situation. That those things, again, they don't really serve a lot of people. They don't serve me. They don't serve people who are not in a position of power, and that's where kind of the Nietzschean philosophy comes in, where are you willing to take things into your own hands? Like, I guess he talks about like, um, discarding like a collective moral, definition, like collective morality, and making your own moral code, because a lot of those collective morals just kind of don't serve, again, a lot of individuals, depending what like your position in society is. I mean, again, I think societies are dominated by people who have like really low empathy, if any. And again, the reality is they end up at the top because of that, because they don't give a shit about anyone else or anything but their own gratification, their own acquisition of power and status or wealth and all of those things. And so how can a person who adheres to these strict, collective moral values of like do unto others as others would do unto you, like how can those people compete with the again, the quote unquote antisocial sociopath, psychopath, narcissist, or what have you? How can that average, the average person compete with that? And that's really what I also like kind of came face to face with, like kind of thinking about that, and like am I gonna just keep playing this role of like nice person, um, not breaking rules, stuff like that, when it doesn't serve me? In fact, it keeps me restricted. It keeps me at in a like in my quote unquote place, right? It keeps people in their place because it doesn't challenge power, it doesn't challenge authority. If you just go along with the rules and laws that authority created to protect themselves and their interests, right? I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's kind of just how it is. And I might make another video at some point, like talking more about law, because law really, this is one of those things that people don't understand, that the law is not there to serve like the average person. you know the law really is there for what some would call the bourgeoisie, the upper class, like the really upper class, the ruling class, whatever you want to call it. you know business, large businesses. Like, it's really not there to help the average person, or even a small business person, or what have you. And so yeah, and that's one of those things that people internalize, like I said, morality. And who does that serve? Well, if people internalize this concept of law, and they feel like they attach all of this moral all of this moral um, yeah, I mean, just the moral weight that they give like the law or whatever, following the law. Who does that serve, really? Because it really doesn't serve most people in society, the average person in society, because, like I said, um, the people who write laws and enforce laws are not people who genuinely care about, you know, everyone in society, or people who are not in their ruling class club, or whatever it is. Um, and so I guess that's what this next clip kind of talks about. I don't think this clip is about like the philosophy of the show or the series Breaking Bad. It talks about the philosophy of like of the transformation of the Walter White character. I don't think this clip gives away like too much about the series, or the spoilers or whatever, but just be mindful. I mean, if you watch the whole thing, it might, I think it does give away some stuff, but I think the parts I'm going to show don't give away too much. But I also recommend watching that whole thing. Um, but yeah, I'll just show that now, and then if I want to expound on that, I'll do that. So let's go ahead.
he passed away. He passed away. In his work Thus Spoke Zarathustra, philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche professed his idea of man's ultimate state. Zarathustra is a prophet-like character who decides to share his wisdom with the world after a period of seclusion. He declares that God is dead, pointing to the fading influence of Christianity on Western civilization. Even though Nietzsche criticized Christianity, he also predicted that Western civilization would fall into nihilism without the guidance of religious morals. Nietzsche argued that people don't live by bread alone. We need meaning in our lives. How could people survive and thrive without an overarching purpose? In an attempt to save people from the soul-crushing hands of nihilism, he proposed the idea of the Overman, or Übermensch in German, not to be confused with Hitler's Übermensch, which comes to fruition in the story of Zarathustra. The Overman is a fully self-actualized being, a vision of what someone could be, which differs per person, an ultimate potential to aim for. The Overman rejects collective morals, like those presented by Christianity, and creates his own morals. Nietzsche described a human being as a tightrope over an abyss between the beast and Overman. Attempting to cross the abyss is a dangerous but fulfilling undertaking. But to move away from being a mere human animal, man must strive to overcome one's human nature and become an Overman. I quote, "All beings so far have created something beyond themselves. And do you want to be the ebb of this great flood, and even go back to the beasts rather than overcome man? What is ape to man? A laughingstock or a painful embarrassment. And man shall be just that for the Overman, a laughingstock or a painful embarrassment." End quote. And you kick that bastard as hard as you can, right in the teeth. End quote. Nietzsche was disgusted by what he called slave morality, which he saw as human weaknesses turned into virtues. His Overman, therefore, was amoral, which isn't the same as immoral. Amoral in this context means rejecting traditional values and creating one's own. Evidence of Walter White moving towards the Overman ideal is him shedding off old collective morals and adopting new ones, or creating his own. This moral transformation is a testament to independent thinking and self-command that lie at the basis of his ascent to power. Instead of turning the other cheek, Walt physically attacks his son's bullies in the clothing store. Instead of presenting himself as meek and timid, he begins to assert himself and stand up against tragedies. Instead of refraining from killing, considerably one of the worst crimes from a general moral perspective, Walt reluctantly kills drug dealers Crazy 8 and Emilio early on in the story, and later he ruthlessly liquidates anyone who stands in his way to the top. Walt also employs revenge instead of quote-unquote weaker morals like acceptance or forgiveness when dealing with his enemies, Gretchen and Elliot. He isn't shy from using deceit and manipulation to reach his goals, and replaces his humbleness for pride, as he wants the world to feel the impact of his activities, ingenuity and skill. Nietzsche stated, "What is good? All that heightens the feeling of power in man, the will to power, power itself. What is bad? All that is born of weakness. What is happiness? The feeling that power is growing, that resistance is overcome." End quote.
So yeah, as the clip mentioned there, you know, that Walter White character is a person who, really changed himself from like, someone who just went along, followed the rules and all of that, to someone who took it upon himself to do what he wanted to do, right? Without being restrained by, the law, by morality, at least the, traditional or society's, typical morality and all of that. Um, and yeah, I think the issue again, like if society is dominated by people who have those traits, right? It's no wonder that most people end up trapped, right? They're trapped. You know, they are herded, like sheep by these people who have no like fear, have no empathy, and all those things. And so, that's kind of again something I kind of, came to realize over time is that, I can't wait around and like expect people to like treat me, the way I want to be treated. That sometimes like you kind of have to be willing to like, take certain steps and make things happen. Um, and take it upon on oneself to really on myself to do what I need to do to make something happen instead of just like relying on like someone else's goodwill or morality or empathy or what have you, right? And that's the whole point. And an example of this like in society, right, is like electoralism, right? Like voting, people um, thinking that if they vote for this person or write a letter to their congressperson, that they'll have this moral you know epiphany or something, or just or imperative to do what the will of the people is, and this and that, and clearly that's not going so well, right? So at what point do people, stop relying on things like that, doing the things they're told to do, that they're allowed to do, just vote and write letters and petitions and marches, nonviolent protests, pickets and stuff like that that you end up accomplishing next to nothing. And at what point are they willing to actually, put themselves like, you know, in a position to make things happen? Because I think, and that's the biggest kind of like point of all this, like these two topics and all of that, is that people have the power, right, to make change, but they kind of give that power away, to these institutions, to people who don't give a fuck about them, but have them, have the majority manipulated enough to keep playing by their rules, the rules that the ruling class or whatever you want to call them, the parasite class, or these people, you know what uh, what they tell people is acceptable or allowable, right? And so people keep doing those things, and then it keeps not getting anywhere, right? So I mean, that's all I wonder is, at what point do people realize that, and do they have the capability to really accept that, on a deep level, fully realize that, right? And that's where, again, like I decided I was gonna, realize those things myself, even if I, clearly can't make that happen for other people. I can do what, I can take on those things and do what I want to do, and not let all of these artificial things get in my way. And it actually is pretty effective, and so it's interesting how, I've seen a lot of this in the last, several years. There is this weird kind of like victim thing, and again, like, it's difficult because, like, again, as like an empath, it's not that I'm saying that people aren't, victimized in by certain things and all of that, but at the same time, the things that people then turn to, like whether it's again, voting or the law or police or military or whatever, to protect them. I mean, it's just, you're just looking in the wrong place. and frankly, you would be better off, um, putting things into action yourself rather than relying on the things you're told to rely on, right? And yeah, and I guess the last thing I want to mention is the reason I have like this yin yang up here is because I think a lot of it is about balance. Like again, like with that last clip, I'm not saying everyone needs to be a brutal, whatever term you want to use. Like, um, that's the thing. Like I think everyone's different. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. If people were more able to like work together in a real way, it's not that every single person has to be a certain way, but there, you would hope there would be some balance, like whether it's again at a society level, where people, again, if they really want something to happen, that they're willing to actually put that into motion, right? Instead of being passive and again doing things that are not effective, and falling for just manipulation and lies and tactics that keep them stuck in the position they're in. Like I said, by people who again don't have like any empathy, don't have all of those moral hang-ups and whatnot that I think most people do. Um, and I think the balance aspect is pretty important, right? Because yeah, you don't have to be Machiavellian. I don't think you have to be like I'm like what I'm talking about with myself. Like I'm not saying I'm a fucking um I don't know, whatever you want to say, like Machiavellian, that I don't care about anyone anymore. Like I said, I think there are both aspects, both the empathic side and the side that is also, what do the kids say? Fuck around, find out. You know, so both. You don't have to be just nice and passive, or you don't have to be just an asshole and um, just violent, or just you know insensitive, right, to anything. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's danger in being too far to one side or the other, and I think that plays out like at the society level in an interesting way. Um, I think there are, different. I think that imbalance manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Like in society, like there's it's interesting how Mark Passio talks about, like he gave this presentation on like order followers maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that I actually made a video back then, kind of highlighting it, where he talks about mainly police and military and like the mentality of order followers. And one thing he said is really relevant here, where he talks about how like the order follower has a right brain mentality when it comes to their superior. And so by that he means like that the like that individual person, like a soldier for example, that they're not critical, like they're not critically thinking about why they're following these orders, right? Why they're submitting to this authority. Like, so in that particular instance, they're using kind of like the empathic aspect, right? They're being empathic, or passive, or whatever, non-critical of like the fact that they're obeying these orders from this person, this authority. But when it comes to the person below them, like whether it's like another soldier lower on the totem pole, or a person that they're killing, right? Like if they're a soldier sent, a U.S. Soldier sent to Afghanistan, and they're killing people, they don't have that empathy, obviously, for those people, right? They're using the left brain, that is just we might say unemotional, unempathic, uh, just mechanical, and just again doing what they're told by the authority, not having any, not having any, what Mark Passio will call like heart-based intelligence of like asking why am I doing this? Like, gee, like I thought we're taught that killing is wrong, but somehow now in this context, killing is my job. What they're getting paid to do. A soldier. So yeah, I think that plays out in society. Like certain things people just accept, right? They're not critical towards them, but then towards other people, they're critical. People were taught to revile, whether it's like homeless people or poor people. You're taught to just, not have empathy for them, essentially, right? You know, and we're taught to have respect for people who are, very wealthy in a lot of cases. I mean, of course, people will talk about it negatively, but a lot of people will defend it, right? Like they'll say, well, they worked hard and that's why they're a multi-billionaire, and that's again their free will choice. And if you want to be a billionaire, then you just have to work hard, and if you are poor, that's your own fault. It's your own free will choice. And so there's this weird way that plays out, like when people decide to be empathetic, right? When people decide to who people decide to identify with, who they decide to, have, who they have empathy for, who they don't. And again, I think that's fed to us by, different sources, the sources that dominate society. And, people internalize it, and even to their own detriment, things with, right? I mean, like another example could be like the mandate thing with the shots over the last couple years, right? A lot of the same people who came out like against these mandates are people, who were saying, hey, it's not fair to fire people for not wanting to take this medical intervention. I mean, a lot of those same people, because I've seen this like personally, like actual people, not just like on the internet. A lot of those same people are people who would look at, someone who works in like food service, works, or, any service industry really, because those are pretty, horribly low paid jobs. And if they, try to organize, for better working conditions, or for a union, or all of those things, or for higher pay, right? I mean, we've seen that over the last several years, like the whether it's like raising minimum wage, you'll have plenty of these people who come in and are like, well, fuck you, go to college, become a lawyer, become a fucking entrepreneur, and then like, yeah, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, use your free will to become a billionaire. And that shit doesn't make sense. I mean, that's the thing. It's like I said, a lot of the same people who are raising, like, it's the same issue. It's an issue of authority, right? In the context of a workplace, you know, you don't have much autonomy. You are subjected to an authority, um, and a lot of the people who, 2 years ago all of a sudden realized that, who for a lot of their life were probably, yeah, shitting on these people and saying, they don't deserve, higher wages. They don't deserve to make enough that they can just live with one full-time job, that if they still don't make enough, that's just their problem, and they should just get more and more jobs. And, that's what I'm saying. That's the slave morality. I mean, a lot of people do internalize that, this concept of working hard in and of itself as like a positive moral attribute, without looking at what that serves. What does it serve? It doesn't serve anything good, really. I mean, the vast majority of jobs are bullshit. They exist because we live in a system that requires money to have anything, to have a fucking roof over your head and food. Um, and I mean, I can't get too far into that, or this is gonna go forever. But I'll try to talk more about all of that. That whole concept of money and property, private property, and just how the whole system works in that regard, and why people obviously are just working more than ever when 50 years ago people were told they would be working less and less, and it's been the opposite, just with all the factors, the cost of living and just everything else. And again, who decided that someone's whole life should be working for some billionaire, doing something that isn't truly helping humanity? I mean, is making a fancy coffee helping humanity? I don't think so. And yet, those are the corporations that are hugely profitable, and then people will shit on the people at the lowest levels that make that company run, that make those profits for the CEOs and all those at the top, and the shareholders, and people will shit on them and tell them, fuck you, like, you don't deserve more. Just keep working, work harder. If you don't have enough money, just work, work, work. So that's what I'm saying. Like, that kind of hypocrisy within so many people. That's why we can't have nice things. People don't seem to understand things until like they directly affect them, and then they don't even realize like the hypocrisy there. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, um, yeah, I don't know. It's a lot, but I think. Well, let me see. Is there anything else? Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say again, like, balance is important. Oh yeah, I guess one last thing I'll bring up is, again, there's all these narratives in society, right? And I mean, like I mentioned, the victim thing, which again, like I said, I don't think that's good. Like, I don't think it's helpful in any way to encourage people to just feel like they're powerless. Because, like I said, I think people, like the Nietzschean philosophy was saying, people have power, right? It's a matter of whether they can harness that, whether they can actualize that in themselves without, like, permission from society or whoever. Um, and so, yeah, on that side of the coin, the whole like victim mentality isn't good. But then we also have a lot of people who have like a false, like the people, whoever, whatever group, whatever people who then will talk about like, well, will shit on the, oh, those, victim, quote unquote woke or social justice warriors is what it was called before woke became the word. But yeah, people who will then say like they respond to that with like, oh, I'm the, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps and whatever, like pure individualism and pure, like I said, I don't think everyone should have to be, all like that, because it is, not everyone can be that way. Not everyone can be like a gladiator, like fighting for everything all the time. And a lot of society ends up being that way. That is like the Darwinian like survival of the fittest. And I would think, again, if people had true care, had this again, the balance of like having care for each other, that yeah, you can help people who genuinely need help. They shouldn't just die and be tossed to the wayside because they can't be that gladiator type or whatever the fuck, all the time, right? And realistically, most people do depend on other other people to some degree, or even nature, whatever it is. Like, I don't think there's such a thing as a pure, individualist. That is like a myth again that's created by certain interests to defend certain systems, right? To just make it seem like uh, no one should care about anyone else. I mean, like I said, right? So yeah, I mean, there's a balance between that. You can be both. You can both be powerful in yourself, and but you can still have empathy for others. You can still be willing to help people. God forbid, God fucking forbid you help someone without needing to be paid, without needing to get something in return, right? Transactional, right? And that's what the society we have now is all about. Is everything is a transaction. That's why. Yeah, I mean, you know, there's just no genuine like sense of like caring for a person on just a human level. Everything has to be transactional, and of course that's made worse by the fact that, like I said, you need money to survive and all that. So of course, if people are working like 3 jobs, then yeah, they don't have any more time to help people, and that, I think that's a purposeful thing that's put on people in this society. So all those things, and yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those people who wear that persona of like the rugged individualist are also really fake, and of course they also are falling into all kinds of traps themselves, and because they decided that they've internalized what they've been told, and they think they're being virtuous in their way, but really they're also just out of balance. So I guess, yeah, I think that expresses what I was trying to say about that. Because, yeah, there's a lot of just fake people running around, like, you know, just telling everyone to buck up and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I just want to make it clear that that's not what I'm trying to, like, say with the Breaking Bad philosophy thing. It's just that, you know, if people, hope maybe some people can do that. And like I said, as far as free will goes, I don't know, like obviously I don't think most people can necessarily just like choose, all of those things, even if you try to present that to them. I mean, like I was saying in the beginning, though, that's just a very difficult concept, like the limitations of like human behavior, psychology, all of that. So yeah, I mean, that's just the thing to me. It's like it's not difficult for me to see how you can have both yin and yang. You can both be strong and be caring, and you can be kind and be firm when you need to be, or be willing to defend yourself or whatever when you need to. Um, you don't need to be a victim, but you also don't need to uh, be the person who takes advantage of other people, right? Or who inflicts suffering on other people, right? So it's a two-way street, and I think that's missing a lot in our quote-unquote society, and I think that's at the root of a lot of the issues going on. And maybe it's been that way for a long time, or it's happened in cycles or what have you. But those are just my thoughts and observations, and you can do with those observations and all my thoughts and whatnot, what you will, and feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. And like I said, I recommend watching those 2 videos in full that I linked in the description. And I think that's all for tonight. Whatever time it is, where you are when you're listening to this, I hope you enjoy your day. And that's all for now. Thanks.